Hello, and welcome to yet another Panzer II DLC. This time it says in 1941, and it spans 20 missions covering the Balkans and Barbarossa as the top brass bounces your troops between the needs of Army Group Center and Army Group North. The new DLC also introduces the very appropriate muddy terrain, the updated Soviet infantry models, and the ability to build airfields, which might be kinda useful in the high in space and low in infrastructure Soviet Union. I say might because today we're not gonna talk about them. As usual, I'll cover the entire DLC in 3 episodes, and in this one we'll cover the invasion of Yugoslavia, the destruction of Allied forces in Greece and Crete, and a little dip into the huge pile of Soviet trouble. If you've already played the 1939 and 1940 DLCs, you will find the gameplay somewhat similar, especially since the enemies are the same, and you can expect a lot of enjoyable maneuvering through mountainous terrain and lots of paratrooper shenanigans. Before we get to the mission guides themselves, I must point out that I'm not covering the training mission this time. It is straightforward and the game gives you all the instructions you need. Just make sure you end up with really experienced anti-tank units, and always say yes to any new and unusual equipment. Also, in a particularly enjoyable nod towards Panzer Corps 1, the training mission is where you can get the famed bomber pilot Hans-Ulrich Rudel. I really enjoyed the fact that you can customize his traits, and ultimately went for the incredibly powerful double attack, lightning attack, and ignore entrenchment combo. The other choices are very strong indeed, so feel free to tell me about your favorite Rudel in the comments. And now for the mission guides. Being the first mission of the DLC, Zagreb is the most difficult scenario I have ever seen in this game. Of course I haven't. There's no real challenge in Zagreb, there are no traps, and it serves as more of an introduction into the whole thing and into the complex political games that Yugoslavia was involved in early 1941. So while your colleagues are getting drunk in Hungary, send your troops directly through Varaždin towards Zagreb. Make sure you don't have any slower units like chassis C2 tanks or something, because you'll have to cover a lot of ground here and not face too much resistance. There will be a few defenders and counterattackers in Zagreb, but they won't take a long time to destroy, and you'll be sent to the east to check all of the villages marked there. Obviously, the one you need is the furthest away from where you are, so it's probably a good idea to split your forces and send lighter units like recons to wreak havoc in the east right from the start, while your heavy hitters deal with Zagreb, and then pivot towards the east as well. Expect some light resistance and make sure you cover your artillery, because there will be a few cavalry attacks. The Yugoslavia mission is trying to be cute and tricky with you. Oh, look at that big city. Oh, huge river. Lots of fortifications. And all those deployment areas around it. Is it gonna be another siege? Well, if you know anything about the real invasion of Yugoslavia by the Germans, the answer is no. Belgrade is poorly protected by static defenders, and in any case, it's not the most difficult objective here. So your main objective in the north is to cross the Danube and bypass the city altogether, leaving a small contingent to take the objectives and defend them, as some Yugoslavian infantry will come from the north. That unit of bridging engineers, which you'll probably not need anymore by that point, and a motorcyclist unit will be enough for that task. Your main force should advance south towards Sarajevo, and as you approach that city, make sure you don't split your forces. The city itself and the mountain pass east of it are the most difficult parts of this entire scenario. Carefully deal with the city first. There will be a couple of strong tank units there, and an overstrength AA gun. Once they're all dead, send your troops to that mountain pass, but make sure they're provided with enough artillery support, because the Yugoslavians will counterattack there with pretty strong infantry and cavalry units. This is very much intended as a trap, so it's a good idea to prepare for it. However, once you've dealt with all of those counterattackers, you are set for the mission. First, you've got the best positioned airfield in the center of the map, and from here you can split your forces and send one half towards Nish. The terrain is flat around that objective, so more tanks are advisable. Veles is slightly trickier, and my approach to it was to sit on the bank of the river across Veles to just distract the AI and force it to counterattack, all while I position my long-range artillery units around the town and send strong infantry units to the west of Veles. Also, expect a good amount of resistance in the air. The Yugoslavians actually will bring Bf-109s, though these are older models. They're still strong, so make sure you have enough fighters and maybe AA guns. The first wave of air attacks will come on turn 1, whereas the second will be triggered once you reach about halfway between Veles and Sarajevo. Alright, Thessaloniki is the first mission in a series I call Where Do I Send My Bloody Paratroopers? The Greeks have impressive defensive lines here which your rather middling allies will not be able to break through. The good news is that the supply for these defensive lines relies on a couple of choke points. And it's those choke points that you should send your paratroopers to. One is around Gorica, which is one of your objectives, and the village north of it. 3 strong paratrooper units will be enough to cover that area and defend against enemy tank counterattacks there. And with the encirclement, the Greek troops will not be able to withstand the Italian onslaught. A tank unit or a Stug might also be used for support there. After all, you don't have to care about the Italians' objectives, but these guys will have to take Gorica. In the east, it's very tempting to send your paratroopers to block those bridges and cut off Thessaloniki and the entire Metaxas line. And it may be possible on easier difficulty levels, or if you have the Deadly Grip Commander trait, which speeds up the suppression of encircled units. On Generalissimus difficulty, the Greeks and the strong British units will just counterattack and wipe out those paratroopers before they can even think of suppressing the enemy units to the east. The Bulgarians there also can't always be trusted to maintain a solid encirclement line. So, where your paratroopers fail, you do a ground up. Do a direct blow towards Thessaloniki with all of your troops. The British have brought a lot of tanks and generally very strong units there, including artillery and AA, and it feels like it should be a pincer maneuver or anything. No. Bring lots of artillery, use those hills to increase their range, suppress the AAs, bomb the enemy artillery support and tanks, and slam your way towards the sea. This is a Zhukov battle, not a Guderian one. Once you have reached Thessaloniki, most of the British forces will be destroyed, and from there on you can just take whatever you want. Also remember that beyond Thessaloniki, Mount Olympus and Gorica, you don't have to take any of the objectives. So if there are any flags left unoccupied in the aftermath, well, it's your choice. In Thermopylae, we see the British running away and the Australians taking the stand. This is really bad news because both in Thermopylae and Bralos, they have extremely strong defenses with AA guns, artillery, AT guns, and strong hero-equipped tank units. Thankfully, there will be no resistance in the air whatsoever, and the British, i.e. red troops, will be just running away and not try to counterattack. They will try to gather around Elatea and you can set up a few traps for them and prevent that from happening. Bralos is the most difficult objective in this mission, and it kind of looks, because of the tall mountains, that it could be cut off and encircled. I've found it rather difficult because the Australians have a bunch of mobile and reacting troops there, not just static there, and all attempts at setting up a bubble resulted in dismal failures. But your paratroopers can actually be useful here. Right off the bat, send your paratroopers to take that village between Bralos and Alatea. This way, you'll be able to intercept a bunch of British troops running away. You will take the best positioned airfield in this mission and make sure to rebase your planes there. And finally, as you approach Bralos from the front, these paratroopers can be used to stab it in the back, with a particular focus on neutralizing the strong anti-air defenses there. Thermopylae is much easier. Block the town from the west, and then use that long and winding mountain pass to bypass the defenders, encircle them, destroy the AA gun, and just bomb them into oblivion. Oh, and there's also a secret in the village across the bay. There's a 30-strong infantry unit sitting there, so make sure you arrive there prepared. The invasion of Crete is called Operation Mercury because it causes heavy metal poisoning. It'll spell 15 minutes of fame for your paratroopers because these will be the only ground forces that you'll be able to use. See that Italian fleet? Overconfident and a complete failure. The British will sink all of them without sustaining any serious damage, and you will be denied transport troops for the entire mission. You will have to rely on your air force to replace all of the major firepower you normally have in your ground troops. And the victory up there will not come easy because the British have a bunch of strong air units on the island and a squadron of fighters and bombers deployed on a carrier. These planes will become the primary target for your fighters. Make sure to bring a lot. Resist the temptation to destroy the British ships. Even though they can quite devastatingly bombard your troops on the coast, once your paratroopers get deeper into the island, they will be powerless, and you really need those core slots on something more useful than strategic bombers. That little peninsula west of Malame is an obvious target for the initial assault. However, it's worth sending 3 or 4 paratrooper units to the east in order to help the Yellow faction. They are pretty competent, but in my experience, they tend to fail if left to their own devices. Plus, it allows you to secure that supply point, though despite the appearances and that inviting dense forest along the boundary of the map, completely encircling the Greeks by taking all of the supply points and cutting that road to Rhetimnon is hard. Remember, Kalami Fort has a harbor which functions as a supply point, plus Rhetimnon is well defended, and those guys will not hesitate to attack anyone who paradrops there. Once you establish the bridgehead in the west, bypass Malame and encircle it. It's too well defended to be attacked head-on, and you will have to somehow weaken the AA gun there to be able to bring in your bombers. And make sure they're nearby and supported by fighters because the British will counterattack in the air. They'll also send a few mobile troops to attack you from the south, so make sure you don't leave your paratroopers unattended in the middle of a plain. Once your western and eastern bridgeheads meet at Kania, the Yellows should already hold most of the eastern objectives. If they don't, help them out, and make sure to take that supply point airfield for a little secret and a few reasonably interesting British planes. It's really refreshing to finally find yourself in a place that hasn't seen a mountain in the last few 100 million years. And if you've ever heard the name Raseiniai, you know there are gonna be a bunch of KV tanks in there. And sure, they're there, all 5, though the strength, hero-infested KV-1s and 2s sit there and wait for you. And while they wait, let's talk about another objective. As part of this mission, you have to destroy all 30 enemy plane units. Luckily, most of them are grounded, and the only air defenses that the Soviets have on turn 1 are a couple of measly I-15s. However, around turn 6, they will all take off, and those guys will not joke around and will cause you a lot of pain if numerous enough. So your primary task here is to cover as much ground by turn 6 as possible and to kill as many grounded enemy planes. So to do this, you split your force into two. Your main force, equipped principally with Panzer IIIs and AT guns, will advance towards Raseiniai, destroying everything in their path and stopping near that village. These guys will eventually engage with the KVs. A smaller and more infantry-oriented group should advance east towards Vilnius, which here is called Vilnius. I don't know what the city did to them, but that's the way to cover as many airfields by turn 6 as possible. Some will probably be left, but it's not going to be that much of a problem by then. Your next step is going from Raseiniai to Baisogala, and here you must be very careful. Don't rush with your tanks, cover everything with AT guns, and keep your Stukas handy. The Soviets have nasty reinforcements on the other side of the river, so blocking those bridges is also a good idea. What isn't a good idea, though, is trying to replace your proper AT guns with 15cm artillery. They will indeed provide defensive support, but the KV's skin is way too thick for them. You really need dedicated ATs here. Tank killer heroes also help a lot. Now, once you cross the river, it's not going to be too difficult to finish the mission because the defenses around Baisogala look impressive, but they're easily outflanked and destroyed. And oh my, this is just the beginning. And this is it for the first part of this DLC. I've really enjoyed my time with it so far. The Balkans missions aren't revolutionary per se, but still have a bunch of aces up their sleeve and present interesting tactical challenges. Nevertheless, the mission in Raseiniai shows that the war in the Soviet Union is going to be very different, and I'm looking forward to see it transpire in Panzer Corps 2. Oh, and by the way, remember last time we met, Captain Wagner and Capitana Anna were having a baby. And you know what? Just don't tell them. I bought it this ugly pink tractor as a gift. It's gonna be brilliant.